It began with a chair sliding back and a smile that wasn't kind. The lunch crowd was soft with music and money, white tablecloths catching the sun. She was an older black woman in a navy dress, pearls at her neck, hands steady. Her friends teased her about the soup. They had a reservation. Their name was spelled right on the card. It should have been simple. When she asked the host if they could move to a quieter corner, the manager came instead. He looked at the card. He looked at her. Something small and mean crossed his face, like a shadow. "I'm afraid those tables are reserved for our regulars." He said. The room did that thing rooms do, went quiet in little circles. She smiled, the kind that keeps peace. "We are regulars today," she said. "We booked a week ago." He didn't move. "Not that kind," he answered, light as if he were telling a joke that wasn't a joke. A few diners glanced down. Forks touched plates without sound. Her friends shifted, unsure whether to stand up or sink lower. She breathed once, deep, the way mothers breathe when they choose grace over fire. "I'm sure there's been a mistake," she said. She took out her phone and showed the text. "Reservation confirmed. Party of 4, 12:30. The time glowed like a small lantern. Proof, gentle and plain. The manager leaned in, voice sugar on glass. "Ma'am, this isn't your kind of place. Let's not make a scene." There was the word, your kind. The tightness moved through the room. The server froze mid-step. Someone at the bar whispered, "Did he just say that?" The woman near the window lifted her phone. Then another. Faces rose, not to help, but to witness. Cameras gave the moment edges. The older woman folded the reservation card and set it by the water glass. She didn't fold her dignity. "We won't make a scene," she said softly. "We'll make a record." Her friend's hand trembled on her sleeve. "Do you want to leave?" the friend asked. "Not yet," she said. Her eyes were clear. "I would like the table we booked." He laughed. A quick sharp sound that scraped the room. "You can take the patio," he said. "It's more comfortable." A young busboy whispered, "I'm sorry," as he passed. The apology hung there, thin and true. She stood, not to flee, but to be seen. "My name is Evelyn," she told the manager. "You will remember it someday." Phones were already uploading. Captions formed faster than apologies. The first clip hit 1,000 views before she sat back down. By the time water glasses were refilled, the number was racing. Anger gathered like a storm over white linen, over pearls and steady hands. She placed her palms flat and waited, calm as a held note, while the room learned what it had done. Outside, a delivery driver peeked in, shook his head and pressed share. Again and again. The office was built for power. Glass walls framed the skyline. Polished floors caught every reflection. But inside the room there was only silence. The CEO sat at the head of his long table, phone in hand, watching the screen. A video shaky, grainy, caught on someone's device. His mother, his Evelyn. Sitting tall, pearls at her neck while a man leaned close and told her she was not their kind. Her voice came through the speaker, calm and steady. "We won't make a scene, we'll make a record." Around her, diners shifted. Some embarrassed, some entertained. A laugh cut through, cruel and sharp. That laugh echoed now in his ears louder than any boardroom applause he had ever received. He didn't slam the phone down. He didn't shout. He only placed it on the table in front of him and let it sit there, the image frozen on his mother's face. His assistants entered, carrying reports, ready with figures and slides. They stopped. They saw him not moving, not speaking. They looked at one another nervously. They had seen him command negotiations with fire, but never like this. Never this still. One braver than the rest asked, "Sir, are you all right?" He looked up slowly. His eyes were glassy, but his jaw was calm. "Play it," he said. They hesitated, then connected the phone to the big screen. The video filled the wall. Evelyn's soft voice, the manager's cold dismissal, the hush of the dining room, the rise of phones. Everything played out larger than life. Every assistant shifted, shame tugging at them, as if they too had been in that room and done nothing. Finally he whispered, almost to himself. She told him her name. The assistants waited, expecting orders, an angry press release, a legal team, a phone call. Instead he leaned back, steepled his hands, and closed his eyes. The silence was heavier than rage. Something irreversible had begun. They all felt it. They all knew. It started small. A TikTok clip posted by a college student at the bar, captioned with trembling fingers, "This just happened. Watch how she holds herself." Within an hour it had 100,000 views. By nightfall, 1 million. The hashtags grew teeth. Not your kind. Her name is Evelyn. Twitter burned with it. Instagram filled with still images of her face, her calm eyes against the sneer of the manager. Commenters poured in from every corner. "Look at her grace. Look at his cruelty. I've been here before. I've lived this." People shared their own stories of exclusion. The internet became a chorus of memory and fury. Overnight, morning shows picked it up. News anchors repeated the words, shaking their heads. Panels debated whether this was a symptom of something larger, though everyone already knew the answer. Still, in the chaos, one detail lingered under the surface. Someone recognized her. Not every viewer, not yet, but enough. Comments began to whisper, "Isn't that Evelyn Carter, the mother of—" No confirmation, just suspicion. Meanwhile, the restaurant's social media flooded with reviews. 1-star ratings, angry emojis, demands for apology. The chain tried to delete, but screenshots outpaced their deletions. Every attempt to bury the story only fed it further. By sunrise, the video had become more than a clip. It was a symbol. And still, Evelyn herself hadn't said a word. In their marble estate outside the city, the billionaire family sat around a dining table much larger than Evelyn's. They scrolled through headlines on tablets and phones, laughing. "Cancel culture," the patriarch said with a smirk. "It'll pass by next week." His wife poured wine, unconcerned. Who even was she? Nobody important. Their children chuckled. Twitter people don't buy stocks. Who cares? They clinked glasses, toasting their own invincibility. For generations, their name had meant power. They owned chains of restaurants, hotels, real estate. They were untouchable, or so they believed. A junior advisor nervously cleared his throat. "Sir, it's trending worldwide. We may need a statement." The patriarch waved him off. "A statement admits guilt. We did nothing wrong." But behind the laughter was arrogance that blinded them. They didn't ask who the woman was. They didn't imagine she could be connected to anyone with reach. To them, she was just another guest they could brush aside. And so they mocked, sipping wine while the storm gathered. The CEO entered his boardroom the next morning. Global partners from London, Dubai, New York sat waiting. Papers spread across gleaming wood. Screens lit up with graphs and charts. But unspoken above every number was the video. They had all seen it. They tried to hide it in their eyes. But the silence said more than words. He didn't mention it. Not once. Instead, he reviewed contracts, adjusted terms, asked for updates on projections. His voice was calm, steady, the rhythm of a man who controlled every inch of the room. But he watched. He saw who avoided his gaze, who swallowed hard when he spoke, who dared to meet his eyes with sympathy, or with shame. Every silence told him more than numbers ever could. By the end, when he closed the folder and stood, the partners shifted uncomfortably. They knew, they all knew. His stillness was louder than fury. The world would not be the same. The ink was almost dry. The billionaire family had spent months parading the news of a $1 billion partnership. They told investors this deal would crown them untouchable, protect their empire for decades. At every cocktail party, they boasted money wins. Money always wins. Across the city, the CEO studied the contracts with expressionless calm. No one in their world knew. Not yet. They didn't know the woman they had dismissed as not their kind was his mother. They had no idea the man across the table, the one they bragged about impressing, carried her name like armor. The boardroom was polished, cameras ready for the ceremonial signing. Champagne chilled in silver buckets. Reporters whispered, preparing headlines about the empire growing stronger. The family walked in beaming, shaking hands, confident that scandal online was just noise. To them, outrage was a storm that always blew past. Today is historic, the patriarch declared, chest puffed. 2 dynasties, securing the future together. The CEO nodded politely. He let them talk, let them boast. He watched the pens being placed carefully on the velvet mat. He listened to their speeches about legacy, about influence, about wealth that silenced criticism. What they didn't notice was his silence, his refusal to add to their noise. A partner leaned into him quietly. Are you sure you want this? The backlash around their restaurants, it's not dying. The CEO's eyes didn't flicker. I hear the noise, he replied softly. But I don't move with noise. I move with truth. The cameras never caught the shift in the room. They never caught the chill that swept through the assistants who recognized something brewing. The family thought they were minutes from sealing victory. They thought their empire was safe. They didn't realize the most dangerous thing in the room wasn't anger. It was silence. And he carried it like a weapon hidden in plain sight. Journalists live on whispers, and whispers had begun circling. The woman in the viral video, calm, dignified, insulted in front of laughing strangers, wasn't just anyone. She was Evelyn Carter. Reporters dug into archives. Photos emerged of her beside her son at charity galas, at scholarship dinners, at quiet church fundraisers. Slowly, connections sharpened. Tweets turned to articles. Is the humiliated woman the mother of one of America's most powerful CEOs? By dawn, news vans crowded outside his headquarters. Microphones angled at his employees. Every worker exiting the building was ambushed with questions. Has he seen the video? Will he cancel the deal? Is the family in trouble? Inside, the CEO worked as if nothing had changed. He signed documents, reviewed data, kept his tone calm, but the tension leaked into the hallways. Assistants fielded calls from reporters around the globe. Phone screens lit up every second. He gave no statement. Not a word. The silence made the press hungrier. They speculated endlessly. Was he planning revenge? Would he forgive? Did the family even realize what was coming? At the estate, the billionaires grew uneasy. For the first time, their advisors mentioned his name with caution. Still, they brushed it off. He won't ruin a billion-dollar deal over his mother's lunch, the patriarch scoffed. Business is business. But the press smelled smoke, and where smoke gathers, fire follows. And the man holding it hadn't even lifted his hand yet. Evelyn never raised her voice about it. She didn't rush to interviews, didn't post statements online. She simply went back to her garden, where rows of flowers leaned toward the sun. Neighbors saw her kneeling in the dirt, wide hat shielding her face, hands moving gently through soil. When asked about the viral storm, she only smiled faintly. The world has a way of revealing itself, she said. Her son visited often, standing on the porch, watching her work. You shouldn't have had to go through that, he told her quietly. She wiped soil from her fingers and looked at him with eyes that had seen far more than one insult. I've gone through worse, she said. And yet I am still here. He wanted to rage, to shout, to strike back with all the power he had. But she placed her hand over his. Don't act from anger, she told him. Anger burns fast. Principle endures. The words anchored him. Not softer, not weaker, anchored. Because he understood now that this wasn't about a table in a restaurant. It was about every quiet dismissal, every moment when dignity was questioned. And the answer had to be larger than outrage. At night, he replayed the video again. Not the insult, not the laughter, but her face, the calm, unbroken stillness, the strength that couldn't be shaken, even under humiliation. That stillness became his blueprint. If he moved now, it wouldn't be for vengeance. It would be for something greater, something permanent. It began with a handful of students holding signs outside the flagship restaurant. Cardboard letters, shaky but loud. Not your kind, not our business. By evening, the handful became a crowd. Chants rose through the streets. Horns blared in solidarity. Across the country, phones buzzed with live streams. Twitter threads turned into maps of protest sites. Instagram flooded with posters calling for boycotts. TikTok clips stitched Evelyn's calm words over marching feet. We won't make a scene, we'll make a record. The record had become an anthem. Customers who once lined up for the family's famous brand now turned their backs. Empty tables sat beneath chandeliers. Waiters whispered about paychecks in jeopardy. Inside offices, executives scrambled, begging for direction. Finally, under pressure, the family issued a statement. It was typed, cold, unsigned. We regret the misunderstanding and any discomfort caused. It was a miscommunication between staff and guests. The public read it, and the outrage deepened. Miscommunication. Cameras had captured every word. There was no miscommunication in telling someone your kind doesn't belong. Comment sections exploded. Not enough, cowards. Say her name. Hashtags multiplied. Her name is Evelyn. Lit up billboards hacked by activists. Buses carried slogans. Street art appeared overnight, painting her face on brick walls, eyes calm, words beneath. "We'll make a record." The protests grew louder, but Evelyn stayed quiet. She watered her garden, waved at neighbors, refused every reporter. The silence only sharpened the fury on her behalf. The family dismissed it still. They laughed in their estate, telling each other protests fade. They believed wealth erased consequences. But outside their doors, a storm was building, and it wasn't going away. The envelope arrived on heavy cream paper, gold lettering pressed deep. It was addressed to the CEO directly, in looping handwriting. Inside, a card. An evening at the family estate. A private dinner to discuss our future. His assistants hovered nervously. "Do you want us to decline?" one asked. They knew what it meant, what it pretended to mean. The family was worried. Yes, but still arrogant enough to assume he could be soothed with wine and promises. He read the card twice, then placed it on his desk. "I'll accept." The assistants exchanged glances. One finally said, "Sir, they don't know." He nodded. "Not yet." The family believed money erased all lines, that charm erased all wounds. They thought he was simply another businessman protecting his profits. They thought he could be bought with flattery. But when he looked out at the skyline from his office, he thought only of Evelyn kneeling in her garden, her still hands in the soil. He remembered her words. "Don't act from anger, act from principle." So he accepted the invitation, not for comfort, not for reconciliation, but for revelation. The stage was being set. They just didn't know they were walking into their own unmasking. The estate glittered that night. Chandeliers spilled light across marble floors. Violins whispered in the background. Servants glided with trays of wine. The family greeted him with wide smiles and firm handshakes. Their laughter echoed through gilded halls. "Welcome, welcome," the patriarch boomed. "We're honored to host a man of your stature." They poured wine, spoke of influence and legacy, bragged about their reach in politics and culture. Every sentence dripped with arrogance disguised as charm. The CEO listened, his face calm, his voice measured. He offered polite nods, soft questions, allowing them to reveal themselves. One son leaned close with a grin. "Ignore the noise online. It'll vanish. Wealth is the real truth." The family raised glasses to toast their empire, their future, their supposed invincibility. But the man at the end of the table said little. He only watched. Every gesture, every careless word piled into silence heavier than thunder. Not once did they imagine the woman they mocked was the one who raised him. Not once did they see their reflection in his still eyes. His silence was not weakness. It was a blade, sharpened and waiting. The dinner stretched on, laughter spilling with wine. Arrogance filled the air like perfume. But as dessert arrived, the CEO set his fork down and leaned back. The table fell quiet, sensing a shift. "I've watched a video," he began softly. "Perhaps you've seen it too." The family stiffened, smiles faltering. The patriarch chuckled nervously. "Oh, the internet fuss?" "Yes, regrettable. Blown out of proportion." The CEO's eyes stayed steady. It was no fuss. It was humiliation. "A woman asked for the table she reserved. And your manager told her she was not your kind." The room froze. Wine glasses hung in midair. The patriarch tried to laugh again. "A misunderstanding." "No." His voice cut through like glass. "Not a misunderstanding. The truth. Your truth." Spoken plainly. He let the silence stretch. Then he said, slow and deliberate, "That woman is my mother." The chandeliers seemed to dim. The air thickened. Every face around the table blanched. Every boast died in their throats. He didn't shout. He didn't rage. He only spoke fact. And fact was enough to make their empire tremble. By morning the world had changed. The CEO stood before cameras, posture calm, voice measured. "I will not be finalizing the partnership with the family that owns this chain. Principles outweigh profit. Dignity outweighs dollars. There will be no deal." The press erupted. Headlines screamed betrayal and shock. Anchors repeated his words with awe. Investors gasped as markets tumbled. The family's stock plummeted by noon. Billions evaporated in hours. At their estate, panic replaced arrogance. Lawyers paced halls. Phones rang non-stop. The patriarch shouted at advisors demanding control. But there was none. The internet roared with approval. He chose dignity. He chose her. Hashtags surged again, louder than before. What had begun as a humiliation ended with humiliation returned, only multiplied by silence, principle and truth. Their arrogance had turned to ashes. The cameras were already waiting when the family stepped up to the podium. Flashbulbs cracked like lightning. Reporters jostled for angles, microphones pushed forward. The patriarch cleared his throat, face pale under the hot lights. My family and I, he began, voice trembling in practiced sorrow, are devastated by the events that have taken place. We want to sincerely apologize for the unfortunate misunderstanding at one of our restaurants. The word hung there, misunderstanding. A groan rolled through the crowd. Twitter lit up in seconds. They still don't get it. His wife dabbed her eyes with a tissue. One son leaned into the microphone, voice breaking as he insisted. We've always valued diversity. We would never intentionally offend. But the internet had already judged. The tears looked staged. The words rehearsed. Clips spread across TikTok with captions mocking the performance. Oscars go to the guilty. Memes plastered their faces beside crocodiles with the words crocodile tears. Behind them, their empire crumbled. Employees, long silent, found their voices. A waitress posted a thread recalling years of being denied promotions in favor of the right image. A former manager shared audio recordings of executives using slurs in private meetings. A dishwasher described being told to enter through back alleys, so guests wouldn't get the wrong impression. One story turned into 10 into hundreds. The pattern was undeniable. News networks began running segments, not about the single viral clip, but about a culture of exclusion baked into the company. Former partners withdrew endorsements. Influencers vowed never to eat in their restaurants again. Celebrities joined boycotts, some sharing their own memories of being treated as less than. The patriarch tried again. Another press conference, another apology. We are listening, we are learning. But his words shook, not from sincerity but fear. Investors pulled out. Stock dipped lower. Banks whispered about pulling credit lines. In boardrooms across the country, analysts whispered the same sentence. This is no longer about one incident. This is about everything they built on cruelty. The empire had stood for decades on marble floors and gilded walls. But marble cracks when the foundation rots. And the rot was everywhere. The first voice came from a young waitress, who had quit after 2 years of trying to survive the chain's flagship location. She uploaded a video from her kitchen table, apron still folded on her lap. Her eyes were red, her voice shaking. They told me I smiled too big, she said, that it looked unprofessional. They told me to cut my hair because it made the wrong impression. When I asked for a raise, the manager laughed and said I should be grateful to even be here. Her clip spread quickly, stitched alongside Evelyn's humiliation. Not your kind, the manager had said. The words echoed, reshaped in every employee's story. Soon, more voices joined. A black chef posted screenshots of pay stubs, proof that his white counterparts made thousands more for the same hours. A Latina hostess described being kept away from VIP sections because she didn't look the part. A dishwasher, speaking softly in Spanish, recalled being told to use the back door so wealthy customers wouldn't see him leave. Each testimony matched the pattern. Quiet cruelty, wrapped in a smile, protected by wealth. Within days, hashtags shifted from Sham, her name is Evelyn, to we all worked there. Thousands of employees, past and present, shared stories of ridicule, of being mocked for accents, of jokes told in break rooms where no cameras existed. Screenshots of group chats leaked. Executives using slurs, making fun of workers' clothes, even their lunches. The internet responded with fury. This isn't a scandal. This is a system. Even longtime customers began to speak out. One recalled watching a waiter scolded for seating a black couple near the windows. Another described how staff whispered instructions to move anyone who lowered the tone of the dining room. Reporters pounced, piecing stories into investigations. What began as one incident now stretched into decades of testimony. Lawsuits were filed. Former staff stood outside restaurants holding megaphones, reading their experiences aloud to lines of protesters who cheered in solidarity. It wasn't just about Evelyn anymore. She had become the spark, but the fire revealed what had always been there. An empire of exclusion, exposed by the people who had carried trays, scrubbed kitchens, and smiled through insults. The family tried another apology, this one longer, full of promises. But no one believed them. The truth was too loud. Public pressure surged. Boycotts became permanent. And the chorus of employees would not be silenced. The hearings began with a gavel-sharp crack. In a crowded chamber, senators and representatives filled their seats. Cameras lined the walls, and the viral video was cued on giant screens. The room dimmed. Evelyn appeared once more, calm in her navy dress, pearls glinting, hands folded as the manager leaned close. His words replayed, unforgiving. This isn't your kind of place. The chamber went still. Some lawmakers shook their heads. Others closed their eyes. The insult carried across microphones, echoing louder than speeches. This is not about a single meal, one senator said firmly. This is about dignity, and dignity is not negotiable. Witnesses were called. Former employees recounted stories of underpayment, exclusion, open humiliation. Their voices trembled, but the weight of their truth silenced the room. A chef held up pay records. A hostess described being hidden from view. A busboy testified that managers called him invisible. The impact was undeniable. Lawmakers leaned forward, pens scratching, staffers whispering. Television broadcasts carried the hearings live. Millions watched from their homes. Hashtags surged again. Dignity first. No more kind. News anchors declared it a turning point. Policy proposals rolled out almost overnight. Mandatory diversity training for all upscale hospitality staff. Independent oversight boards with power to investigate discrimination claims. Anti-discrimination charters displayed publicly in every establishment, enforceable by fines and lawsuits. For the first time in years, bipartisan support surged. One representative admitted, "The public left us no choice. They demanded reform, and they are right." The Billionaire family tried to lobby against it, but their influence had withered. Every lawmaker's inbox overflowed with letters from voters. Every call-in line buzzed with outrage. And when Evelyn's son was asked to testify, he didn't come with anger. He came with stillness. He stood before the chamber, looked each lawmaker in the eye and said, "This was never about one insult. This was about who gets to belong. Today, you decide if belonging is for sale or if it is a right." The chamber erupted in applause. The reforms moved forward. And the world began to change, one policy at a time. When he stepped onto the stage, he didn't raise his hands for attention. He didn't need to. His presence drew the silence tighter. His suit was dark, his expression steady, his voice low but clear as he began. "For days," he said, "you have asked me what I think of the video, what I feel about what happened to my mother." Flashes cracked, pens scratched, but no one dared interrupt. "My mother," he continued, "is a woman of quiet dignity. She did not answer cruelty with rage. She did not throw back humiliation with humiliation. She sat steady, with her head held high. And because of that, the world saw the truth more clearly than any words could explain." He paused. The weight of the silence became its own punctuation. "This is not a story of shame," he said. "It is a story of revelation." It revealed what many endure every day. Dismissed, mocked, told they do not belong. But it also revealed something else. The strength that comes when dignity refuses to bow. The room was motionless. He didn't once mention the Billionaire family by name. He didn't speak of revenge or ruin. Instead, he spoke of change. "This is not about destroying a family," he said. "It is about transforming a culture that tells some they are worthy of the best seats, while others are told they are not the right kind. That culture must end." His voice did not rise, but it carried. "We cannot legislate respect, but we can demand accountability. We can teach dignity. We can refuse to profit from institutions that degrade. And I will use everything I have to see that happen." A murmur ran through the room, not of outrage but of admiration. Reporters who expected fury instead found themselves moved to stillness. "My mother's name is Evelyn," he said finally. "She gave me my strength. And I will not rest until this country recognizes that her dignity and the dignity of every person is not negotiable." Applause broke, at first soft, then rising, until the hall thundered. Cameras streamed his words to millions. Social media lit with admiration. This is leadership. This is power. His words struck deeper than anger ever could. Outrage burns hot and fast. But dignity spoken with clarity can outlast generations. And everyone knew, in that moment, this was no longer just a scandal. It was the beginning of transformation. Weeks later, his footsteps echoed not in boardrooms, but in school hallways. The ceilings were lower, the walls painted with student murals, the air filled with the smell of crayons and cafeteria food. Children lined the hallways, whispering, pointing, their eyes wide. He stood in the gymnasium, microphone in hand, but his voice carried like it always did, steady, calm, unshaken. Rows of young black students leaned forward, waiting. "You've seen the video," he said softly. "You've heard what was said to my mother. Many of you have heard the same words in different places. You've been told you don't belong, that you are not enough." The room stirred. Heads nodded quietly. Some lowered their eyes, remembering. "But let me tell you what my mother showed the world," he continued. "When someone tried to strip her dignity, she did not let them. She sat tall. She kept her voice calm. She refused to give away what no one can take unless you hand it over." A boy in the front row whispered, "She didn't yell?" "No," the CEO said, smiling faintly. "She didn't need to. She let the truth reveal itself. And the truth was stronger than their cruelty." He spoke of her as more than a victim. He spoke of her as a teacher. He told the children that strength is not always loud, that power can live in silence, that dignity is louder than humiliation. "You may think power is money or position," he said, "but real power is knowing who you are and refusing to let anyone tell you otherwise." Applause rose from the teachers, from the students, from parents who stood at the back with tears in their eyes. In community centers, he repeated the same message. He shook hands with teenagers who had been told their names sounded wrong, their hair too wild, their presence unwelcome. He told them what Evelyn had shown him. "You belong everywhere your feet carry you." Children carried his words home. Parents repeated them at dinner tables. Teachers hung his quotes on classroom walls. And slowly something shifted. He was not just a CEO anymore. To them, he was proof that wealth without dignity means nothing. But dignity without wealth can still change the world. His mother's stillness had become a lesson passed down. What began as humiliation had turned into revelation, and the echoes of that revelation were now fuel for a generation that refused to bow. Weeks later, the restaurant reopened under new management. The name on the awning was the same, but everything inside had changed. Gone were the familiar faces of the Billionaire family's chosen staff, replaced by a team determined to rebuild from ashes. The air felt different, lighter though still heavy with memory. At the entrance, just beyond the glass doors, stood a new plaque fixed to the wall. It gleamed bronze under the morning sun, polished until it reflected faces of those who stopped to read. The words were simple, carved deep enough to last generations. "This space belongs to dignity, equality and respect." And below, in smaller letters, an inscription. On this site, a woman named Evelyn Carter was told she did not belong. The world bore witness. Let her calm strength remind us that dignity is not negotiable. What began here as exclusion will endure as testimony. People gathered outside to read it. Some paused on their way to lunch, lips moving as they traced the words. Others brought their children, pointing gently, explaining the story that had swept across headlines. Strangers photographed it, posted online with captions like "Never Forget." Inside, the dining room was quieter than before. Not silent, but thoughtful. The staff greeted each guest with warmth that felt less rehearsed, more human. On the walls hung portraits of community leaders, activists, artists, educators, figures whose faces once would never have appeared in these spaces. Some guests cried softly while reading the plaque. Others stood still, holding the hands of companions. It wasn't shame that lingered there anymore. It was memory, transformed into promise. One afternoon, a teacher brought her students. They pressed close, notebooks in hand, scribbling down the inscription. A boy whispered. She didn't yell, she just told them her name. The teacher nodded, and that was enough. News crews came again, this time not for scandal, but for reflection. A reporter spoke to a young hostess at the door. "How does it feel, working here now?" She smiled faintly. "It feels like the walls finally tell the truth." The Billionaire family was gone, their empire reduced to headlines and lawsuits. But Evelyn's stillness had outlived them, carved now into bronze. Evelyn herself visited once, quietly. She stood in front of the plaque, her gloved hand brushing the edge. She didn't linger long. She only nodded once, then turned to leave. For her, it wasn't about monuments. It was about lives changed. But those who saw her there that day carried the image with reverence, like witnessing history itself breathe. Every evening as the lights outside dimmed, the plaque caught the last trace of the setting sun. Its words glowed in copper fire, reminding all who passed that silence had once allowed injustice here, but dignity had remade it. And in that glow, the world seemed just a little more awake. It was late afternoon when the car pulled up to the restaurant. No press vans waited outside. No flashing lights, no microphones hunting for sound bites. Just a quiet hum of city traffic, the clink of glasses from nearby cafes, and the rustle of leaves along the sidewalk. The door opened, and Evelyn stepped out first, her son steady at her side. She wore a simple gray coat, her pearls glinting softly in the sun. She didn't pause at the entrance. She didn't need to. Inside, the air shifted as soon as they walked through the doors. Staff at the podium straightened immediately. Not out of fear, but respect. The young hostess bowed her head. "Mrs. Carter," she whispered, voice trembling with reverence. Evelyn only smiled. "Good evening." They walked past the lobby where weeks earlier she had been denied. No one stopped her now. No one dared. And yet it wasn't about daring. It was about recognition. Recognition of who she was, and what she had come to symbolize. Servers along the aisle paused, offering gentle nods. A busboy froze, his tray balanced carefully, before murmuring, "Welcome back." She touched his arm lightly as she passed, the way one acknowledges family. The CEO walked slightly behind her, not as her protector but as her witness. This was her moment, the one she had earned, not through wealth or retaliation but through grace. They reached the corner table. The same table she had once requested. The one she had been told was for regulars. Today, it sat waiting, white cloth, smooth, silver polished. Evelyn lowered herself into the chair without hesitation. No cameras clicked. No crowd cheered, only the soft rustle of fabric, the sound of her son pulling out the opposite chair, the faint murmur of a dining room holding its breath. For a long moment she looked around. Her gaze moved over the chandeliers, the polished glasses, the portraits on the wall. Then she let out a quiet sigh. "This is enough," she said. Her son nodded. More than enough. The meal was simple. Soup, bread, tea, but every bite carried a weight. A reversal. A testimony. When they finally rose to leave, no rope stood in their way. No manager with a smirk. Only bowed heads. Quiet respect and a silence that spoke louder than applause. As the doors closed behind them, the moment settled like stone. She was no longer the guest once denied. She was the woman whose quiet power had remade the rules. The runway stretched long and silver in the evening light. Engines rumbled low, a steady heartbeat beneath the sky. The CEO walked alone toward his jet, the weight of weeks behind him. The future still unfolding ahead. No cameras followed. No reporters chased his steps. This wasn't for headlines. It was for history. As he moved across the tarmac, ground crew paused in their work. One raised a hand in quiet salute. Another simply nodded. None asked for photos. None shouted his name. They didn't need to. They knew. From the fence beyond, children waved, hands high, faces lit with awe. Their parents stood behind them, pointing, whispering, "That's him. That's the man who chose dignity over dollars." He slowed for just a moment, lifting his hand in return. Not a wave for glory, but an acknowledgement. A bond unspoken. Everywhere he had gone since the scandal, people met him not with pity or anger, but with respect. Some even with gratitude. They saw in him not just a CEO with wealth and power, but a son who had carried his mother's dignity into battle, and won without ever raising his voice. At the foot of the stairs he paused, turning to look back at the horizon. He thought of the boardrooms where whispers had turned into silence. The protests where strangers shouted Evelyn's name, the plaque carved in bronze, catching the last light of the sun. And he thought, most of all, of his mother in her garden, kneeling in the soil, her hands steady, her voice calm. She had asked him not to act from anger. She had asked him to act from principle. He had carried her stillness with him, and it had become his weapon. As he climbed the steps, the hum of the engines deepened. Reporters would call it the end of a scandal, the collapse of an empire, the rise of reform. But he knew it was more than that. It was a legacy. A legacy not of wealth or deals, but of quiet power. The kind that doesn't shout but endures. The kind that can outlast noise, outlast cruelty, outlast history itself. At the door of the jet he looked down once more. The children still waved. The crew still nodded. The world still watched not through cameras but through memory. And then he stepped inside. The door closed. The engines roared. The jet rolled forward, lifting into a sky streaked with fire and gold. What began as humiliation had ended as history.